Welcome back to the 10-minute Bitcoin show. Gonna get you guys out of here before the next block. We're back talking about this stuff. You know what? I've been thinking that I've been doing a lot of arguing against filterers and supporting things like op return lately, that I need to do a purge. I need a cleanse. I need to remind the audience. I can't have you guys getting it twisted. I am not spam apologist. I do not like inscriptions. I do not like ordinals. I do not like NFTs. I have always been a very loudly outspoken NFT critic, and often to my detriment, right? Because I think I would have a much larger audience on X in general. If having an audience was what mattered to me, it isn't. It's speaking the truth. I have always been a vocal critic of the whole concept of NFTs. I think that the entire tech behind it is bunk. I think that it doesn't solve any actual problems. I think that it introduces all of the same problems that are already there with a traditional database. Let me back up. Look, guys, I'm an internet native, okay? I grew up playing MMOs. RuneScape, right? RuneScape is where I cut my chops learning how the internet worked, learning about virtual asset ownership, learning the basics of economics. I learned playing MMOs, interacting with other people, and learning the marketplaces for virtual items that developed real world value, right? Because there were people that were willing to pay for pixels on a screen in a video game. I get this stuff, okay? I understand that things can have value because people ascribe value to things. I am in no way arguing against the fact that people will place value on things simply because they want them. They might not need to be useful. They might not need to be practical. They might not need to add any tangible value to society. People put value on things. But guys, I do not believe for a second that that is a real phenomenon that has happened around NFTs. I just simply don't. I believe that the narrative has been created to provide plausible deniability for the fact that those things are deceptive fraud. The narrative has been created that those things are a novel technical implementation of ownership of virtual assets, and that there will be this like economy built on top of NFT. Guys, the whole thing is retarded, right? And the reason that I know this is retarded is because I've actually spent my life playing video games, and I actually know how these things work. From a technical perspective, and I actually know how NFTs work, and I know that it's just stupid. I did a video on my YouTube channel back in 2020 called NFTs Are Not the Future of Gaming, and I really hinge a lot of my arguments around why NFTs are so stupid around the concept of the fact that Valve has been doing virtual item ownership, and in many cases cross, what would you call it, like cross game, cross software. They have their ecosystem. Valve has their ecosystem on Steam, and then Valve produces games. And there have been cases in the past where they produce item skins for a certain game that if you own, you can use them in one game, and then you can also use them in another game. It doesn't always work exactly like that, but if anybody wanted to have like this Ready Player One ecosystem where you have this cross-pollination of all of these different items across their ecosystem, it would be Valve, right? Because they have the database, the infrastructure set up for it already, and this stuff works perfectly well. There's a lot of problems that you're introducing when you're talking about, like particularly in game design, right? Where this idea that you're going to issue an asset, and that asset is going to be integrated across all of these different software ecosystems because of the fact that it is like a matrix. Like it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense from a business perspective. It doesn't make any sense from a software design perspective. The reason that companies create items like this to sell to you is to raise revenue for themselves. There's no incentive for me as a developer to, if I were building, let's say I was building a video game, and let's say I was building it around owning virtual items, there would be no incentive for me to support items that you had bought from any other software creator, because there would be no revenue in it for me. It would be a ton of overhead supporting items that you owned. Like, let's say that you owned NFTs are a great example, actually. Let's say that you bought a bunch of stupid NFTs from someone that lied to you and told you that they were a great investment. If I were developing a video game, why would I take any of the NFTs that you own and add support for them in my game when I could just sell you my own NFTs, right? The problem with this thing is ultimately always the fact that it inherently relies on some form of external third-party indexer. And because of the fact that you pretty much have to have that, like if you're going to write video game software and you want to have somebody owns something and you want to have it tangibly represented in the game, you have to code that in. You have to create those assets. Like you can't just like drag and drop the NFT into the game and now it's there it is, right? What we're talking about here is introducing like a third-party database that keeps track of who owns what, how is it displayed, how is it useful, what is the utility of this thing in the ecosystem. You're reintroducing the same exact problems that quote unquote problems, right? Because I don't think that there are any problems there with the way that Valve does this already. I don't think that there's no such thing as scarcity of anything virtual. It can always be diluted, right? Like, and you saw this with this recent Counter-Strike, the Counter-Strike, the drama that happened where they changed how easy it is to get knives or something. I don't know. I don't follow that stuff too super closely, but there's nothing ever stopping someone from issuing more of virtual anything. There's no such thing as digital scarcity unless it's enforced by some type of distributed consensus like we have in Bitcoin. You're never going to get a distributed consensus around images, right? Like that's completely ridiculous. You're never going to have anybody can run any indexer they want, and anybody can say, yes, this hash on the blockchain that I have corresponds to this thing that I own. But that's entirely subjective because it's just whose indexer are you looking at? What does that hash point to? Well, it's in the eye of the beholder. It's totally subjective. Yeah, you could embed the data directly on chain, but now you're at the point where you're talking about like massive expense, massive technical overhead to like dump. What are you going to do? You're going to put like raw image data onto the blockchain, and now you own that raw image data. Like, congratulations, it's an exercise in stupidity. You're not solving any problems that are there with like Valve's system. You're not creating any actual scarcity. There's no such thing. It's not enforceable. You're not actually providing like censorship resistant ownership, because the only reason that you would want to own something like that, like a virtual asset with any kind of utility in a software ecosystem, is because you're allowed to use it in that ecosystem. So the owner of that ecosystem, the database, the indexer, whatever it is that you're having fun in, still has the ability to censor you, right? They can blacklist your items in their ecosystem. They can change the way that they look. They can make it so that you are not like functionally allowed to trade those items in their ecosystem. Your ownership rights are not unforfeitable, because you always have to still reintroduce like these same systems of reliance on third parties that you have already in the traditional systems that work just as fine and are way more efficient and way less expensive. Like Valve does this great. People probably don't know this, but Valve is one of the most profitable companies per employee in the United States, and I think in the world, actually. They're an incredible company. They seem like they'd be a really cool company to work for if you were interested in like video game development. That's not the kind of work I do. I work on application software, but and protocol stuff and things like that. But it's beside the point. It's all stupid. And I need to reiterate the fact that I think NFTs, I think inscriptions, I think ordinals, all of this stuff is scams. It's marketed deceptively. And I think that anybody's involved with it, they know this, right? And if you argue with these people enough, you will eventually get them to admit, yeah, no, everybody involved knows that this is just like deceptive, right? We're all just trying to dump our bags on some greater fools. The entire thing is the definition of a grift, right? And I just want to reiterate that just because I am in favor of things like Op-Return because they are less harmful for Bitcoin in terms of like our ability to provide a path of less harm for spam that already exists because people are dumb, that doesn't mean that I support these incredibly stupid grifts that basically try to trick people into thinking that there's novel technical merit where there is none. And shame on the people that push these things and pretend like they're so exciting, right? Because they're not. And if you've ever been a part of a real community of collectors, they don't push it on other people like it's the greatest new thing ever. So yeah, you guys are scammers.